All right, good afternoon. The Committee on Homeland Security, Subcommittee on Oversight, Investigations, and Accountability will come to order. Without objection, the chair may declare the committee in recess at any point. The purpose of this hearing is to examine how the issuance of non-domiciled commercial driver's licenses to individuals who are unlawfully present in the United States endangers public safety. We are pleased to have an expert.
Mr. Chairman, I have a parliamentary question. Under Clause 2K1 of Rule XI, the chair shall announce in an opening statement the subject of the hearing. And under Clause 2K8 of Rule XI, the committee is the sole judge of the pertinence of testimony and evidence adduced at its hearing. In order to judge if these rules could possibly be satisfied today, could the chair please tell us how the topic of this hearing and the testimony of these witnesses accords with the committee's Rule X jurisdictional statement?
Yeah, overall, you're asking about the jurisdiction of this committee relative to this subject. And given Homeland Security's oversight of the immigration naturalization elements and how that pertains to ICE, how that pertains to a number of different issuances, this falls within our jurisdiction as a committee.
Mr. Chair, per Rule X, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee has jurisdiction over transportation regulatory agencies and roads and safety thereof, and transportation safety and transportation labor. Any bills to improve highway safety would need to be considered and voted on by that committee. I want it on the record before we start that this hearing is really about nothing more than scapegoating immigrants for the president's economy, which is running off the road.
All right, in response, I'm going to just read to you something so everyone can be clear why we have jurisdiction. While DOT is the primary federal regulator of CDLs, DHS plays a critical role in granting work authorizations and immigration benefits through U.S. citizenship and immigration services, working with DOT to verify lawful presence in the country and tasking ICE to arrest and remove deportable aliens who are encountered in the course of commercial vehicle enforcement, particularly through 287 agreements with state and law enforcement. Since September of 2025, ICE has partnered with state highway patrol agencies in several states to conduct joint enforcement operations targeting illegal aliens operating commercial motor vehicles, resulting in significant arrests and taking unsafe drivers off the road. Additionally, compliance with Real ID requirements is also a major security concern, as some states have issued CDLs clearly fail basic verification safeguards, including an instance where the ID listed its holder as, quote, no name given. In my home state of Oklahoma, this was discovered, for a license that allowed the holder to operate a commercial driver's license. The Real ID Act of 2005, passed following the recommendations of the 9/11 Commission, established new standards for identification documents such as driver's license as a way to verify the identities and check the backgrounds of individuals entering vulnerable facilities, especially in the transportation system. And as someone, myself, who has a Class A CDL, I understand the danger when someone has a hazmat endorsement and 80,000 pounds used as a chemical bomb. This is absolutely under the jurisdiction of this committee.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may.
It's not been recognized. If the gentleman has a follow-up, I will recognize him. You are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Chairman, the DOT alone regulates licenses regardless of immigration status. Look, every collision is a tragedy, but it is already illegal and for undocumented immigrants to hold CDL. And nothing the Trump administration is proposing, which will take lawful drivers off the road, will improve highway safety. DOT's rules and GOP bills will actually do the opposite, resulting in more lives lost.
All right, to the ranking member, this is my last statement on this subject. I'm citing from Rule X of Clause 1, the rules of the House. Number 3, functions, Committee on Homeland Security. Number 3, part of its functions of the Department of Homeland Security relating to the following: border port security, B, customs, C, integration, E, research and development, F, transportation security. All right, with that, we will continue. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Good afternoon. Again, thank you for joining us today. Today, the subcommittee will examine a serious growing threat to public safety and the rule of law: the issuance of non-domiciled commercial driver's license to illegal aliens unlawfully present in the United States. Commercial truck drivers are the backbone of the American economy. Every day, they transport food, fuel, medicine, and other critical supplies all across the United States and enable everyday life to continue without disruption. Currently, federal law, individual states are responsible for issuance of CDLs, but they must do so in strict compliance with the standards set by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. The FMCSA requires that for a state to issue a non-domiciled CDL, they must require the individual be legally present in the United States and meet minimum standards for testing, identity, and verification. The FMCSA also recognizes that non-citizens have a basic understanding of the English language to read and understand road signs. Yet recent Department of Transportation audits have revealed alarming failures by many states to comply with these requirements. For example, in Illinois, 1 in 5 non-domiciled CDLs failed to meet federal standards. Last November, the Department of Transportation found that California had illegally issued 17,000 non-domiciled CDLs. That California had illegally issued 17,000 non-domiciled CDLs. A 2025 audit by FMCSA found that over 50% of the non-domiciled CDLs issued by the state of New York were in violation of federal law. As President Trump highlighted in his State of the Union address last week, this issue has seen real and devastating consequences. In 2025 alone, at least 17 fatal crashes resulting in 30 deaths were caused by illegal aliens driving commercial vehicles with CDLs. One of the most tragic examples was a crash in St. Lucie County, Florida. Lucie County, Florida. Am I saying that correctly? Sheriff, is that correct? Thank you. An illegal alien from India failed the CDL test 10 times in the span of 2 months. I want to repeat that. This accident occurred in your county. An illegal alien from India who failed a CDL test 10 times in the span of 2 months in the state of Washington managed to obtain his license, however, in California. Then drove his 18-wheeler to Florida and caused a serious vehicle incident after making an illegal U-turn, instantly killing 3 people. These are not paperwork errors, rather they represent systematic breakdowns and oversight that put American families at risk. These tragic incidents were caused by drivers who should never have been entrusted with commercial driver's licenses in the first place. These individuals were unfit to hold that credential, and if states would follow through with standards and laws, they would not qualify them to receive one. The human cost of these failures is painful. 2024, 5-year-old Delilah Coleman was nearly killed when a tractor-trailer driven by an illegal alien carried a fraudulent non-domiciled CDL directly collided with the vehicle she was in. Following this incident, Delilah endured a coma and months of hospitalization and had to relearn how to walk, talk, and eat. Her recovery was nothing short of a miracle. While I am grateful that Delilah is making progress in her recovery, must be clear, this tragedy should never have happened. When the rules that protect the public are treated as optional by certain states, innocent people like Delilah pay the price. You do not have to be a scholar to understand what a bad actor could do with a 40-ton tractor trailer, especially one hauling hazardous cargo onto highways. In the wrong hands, that vehicle is not just a truck, it's a weapon capable of threatening public safety and national security. This trend is a direct consequence of former President Biden's open border policy. President Biden claimed to have created more than 870,000 new CDL holders in his first year in office. The non-domiciled element, absolutely a part of that. 870,000 in 1 year. In contrast, the Trump administration has been working diligently to combat this issue, taking several critical steps in recent months to restore accountability and compliance with federal laws. This includes a final rule issued in February by the Department of Transportation, significantly tightens eligibility standards for receiving non-domiciled commercial driver's licenses. Additionally, the Department of Homeland Security has increased its coordination with many states, looking to crack down on illegal aliens driving commercial vehicles, launching several successful operations in Indiana and my home state of Oklahoma, also Texas and Wyoming, to name a few. Finally, some states, like Oklahoma, have taken steps to introduce legislation to combat this problem. Model legislation. In May of last year, Oklahoma passed the Oklahoma Secure Roads and Safe Trucking Act, authored by State Senator Kendall Sakiriri and State Representative Jonathan Wilk, which increases the threshold of non-domiciled CDLs and requires that an individual provide proof of foreign citizenship and valid work visa and demonstrate English language proficiency. It's my hope that all states follow the footsteps of Oklahoma as they look to solve this issue. Just as a side note, as Mr. Tipton is going to testify here shortly, 500 people were positioned to be removed, found in a September analyzation of a weigh stations Western Oklahoma I-40 of being in violation of FMCSA. 500 in Oklahoma in a very short time frame, showing how people coming through our state, following suit of this change of statute, is something that every state ought to be looking to replicate, every governor, because of the tens of thousands of these commercial truck drivers that are on the roads coming through your state. Although we are righting previous wrongs, we must remain vigilant. We must make sure the states enforce the law, keep license out of the hands of unqualified people who are unlawfully present. It's not a matter only of public safety, but a matter of national security. Again, I want to thank our witnesses for being here today, and I now yield to Ranking Member Thanadar.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon to all. This past weekend, a convicted felon with bone spurs illegally attacked Iran, launching a protracted war of regime change. President Trump callously said, and I quote, "We may have casualties that often happen in wars," dismissing the over 1,000 lives lost thus far, including 6 American service members and 175 at a girls' school. The Republican-run Congress sat idly by rather than returning to Washington to claim the war powers granted to it in the Constitution. And this subcommittee, rather than focusing on how Trump's war threatens the homeland, is holding yet another hearing on demonizing hardworking immigrants. I am an immigrant who came to this country with very little and worked hard to achieve the American dream. Our country is built on the promise that anyone, regardless of their background, can come here, work hard, and succeed. That is why I am disturbed and offended that the Trump administration is responding to American Truckers United's call to eliminate trucking operators from foreign lands. The Department of Transportation is actively trying to strip refugees, asylees, and DACA recipients of their commercial driver's license under the false pretense of highway safety. If DOT is successful, 200,000 or 5% of commercial drivers will be removed from the road. We are all highly dependent upon these drivers to move goods across the country, take our children to school, transport commuters, maintain and repair roads, and clear streets after the storm. Over 70% of nation's freight moves by truck. Reducing the number of commercial drivers will disrupt the economy and deepen the affordability crisis that already plagues America. The U.S. economy is running out of road. Americans are already struggling to afford groceries, medicine, and other goods because of Trump's tariffs. Fewer drivers also means fewer school buses, mass transit services, and snow plows. Daily life will get harder except for the men in the Epstein files who fly in luxury jets to private islands. Replacing 200,000 experienced CDL drivers with less experienced drivers who statistically are more prone to accidents will reduce safety. Rather than pursuing sensible solutions to prevent collisions, such as requiring speed limiting technologies in trucks, the Trump administration would rather punish immigrants who have a safe driving record than U.S. citizens. Immigrants with non-domiciled CDLs have invested significant resources to satisfy the training, skills, knowledge tests, and requirements applicable to all individuals seeking to hold CDLs. It is already illegal to issue CDLs to undocumented migrants, and federal law requires commercial motor vehicle operators to be proficient in English, including highway traffic signs and signals. Enforce the existing laws, but do not strip immigrants who are here legally of their livelihood, which will harm the U.S. economy and reduce public services. I thank Ms. Liu for joining us today and look forward to her explaining how she is fighting the Trump administration's illogical attempts to change the eligibility rules for CDLs. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I yield back.
All right, thank the ranking member. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I am pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this critical topic, and pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, I ask our witnesses to please rise and raise their right hands. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Please be seated. I would now like to formally introduce our witnesses. Mr. Tim Tipton is the Commissioner of my home state of the Oklahoma Department of Public Safety. He is a nationally recognized expert on police training practices and with nearly 38 years of experience at the department. Mr. Richard Del Toro Jr. is the Sheriff of St. Lucie County, Florida. Prior to his election as sheriff, Mr. Del Toro served as 26 years with the Port St. Lucie Police Department, retiring as chief of police. Foreign Affairs Chairman Mast was going to try to be here to do a special introduction, but he got held up in other activities. Ms. Wendy Liu is an attorney at Public Citizen Litigation Group. I thank each of our distinguished witnesses for being here today. I now recognize Commissioner Tipton for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Burkeen and Ranking Member Thaindar, and esteemed members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you the Oklahoma Highway Patrol's experience with the shocking amount of transnational freight being transported by illegal aliens. The month after President Trump took office, ICE announced its task force model agreements. These agreements allowed state and local officers to become credentialed to enforce immigration laws during routine law enforcement encounters. OHP immediately joined and rapidly sent all 730 of its officers through the ICE credentialing process. With every Oklahoma trooper now having an ICE credential, we've been given a unique and firsthand view of the prolific problem of illegal aliens operating CMVs on our national interstate and defense highway system. By way of a quick example, last September, OHP and ICE conducted a joint emphasis in western Oklahoma along the Interstate 40 corridor. During this emphasis, OHP OHP took 90 CMV operators into custody for immigration violations, aliens from all over Eastern Europe, Asia, and Africa. This means that in an approximate 24 hours of shift work on a random weekday in the middle of our heartland, roughly 50% of OHP's CMV encounters resulted in the arrest of an illegal alien. In fact, since late summer of 2025, OHP's taken over 450 CMV operators into custody for immigration violations. Many of these drivers struggle with even basic English language proficiency and likely received their licenses from an unscrupulous CDL mill. Through this experience, OHP has learned of several concerning problems with the federally regulated system for issuance of CDLs. I will share an account of one OHP immigration arrest that highlights these problems. During a joint OHP-ICE emphasis, OHP encountered a driver operating an 80,000-pound semi-truck traveling from California to Missouri. As our trooper was performing a standard CMV inspection, the driver presented a Real ID compliant CDL with the first name listed as no name given. After discovering the driver was an illegal alien, our trooper used his ICE 287G credential to arrest him for immigration violations. On many similar occasions, we've encountered illegal aliens operating with facially valid CDLs with expiration dates far exceeding the alien's temporary immigration status, CDLs not being labeled non-domiciled as required by FMCSA regulations, and Real IDs being issued to illegal aliens, including Real IDs listed only a first or last name. OHP's experience corroborates the FMCSA's recent policy position that an employment authorization document, or an EAD, is an inadequate qualifier for an alien to operate in this highly regulated critical infrastructure industry. FMCSA's recent rulemaking on non-domiciled CDLs represents a practical and effective solution to many of these problems. However, challengers have already filed suit to upend FMCSA's new rules. I urge Congress to support this rulemaking effort and to pass any legislation that may be necessary to respond to judicial challenges. That leaves the concerns about Real IDs being issued to aliens with a tenuous immigration status. I'm surprised and concerned about the temporary aliens being granted Real IDs. As you are aware, the purpose of a Real ID is to serve as a gatekeeping function into federal facilities, commercial airline travel, and even nuclear facilities. However, the Act authorizes issuance of Real IDs to aliens with nothing more than temporary visas, pending applications for asylum, or temporary protected status, or even a deferred action status, which is merely a parole into the U.S. In view of the gatekeeping function of Real IDs, I urge reconsideration of the qualifiers for aliens to receive these credentials. Let us not forget that a CDL with a hazardous materials endorsement permits a driver to drive a liquid bomb to virtually any location in America. 9/11 should remind us how critical it is to safeguard our transportation network. A coordinated nationwide enforcement effort is critical to protecting our nation, not only from dangers to the motoring public of unqualified alien drivers, but also from potential terrorist threats. Thank you again, Chairman Burkeen, Ranking Member Thaindar, and members of the subcommittee for permitting me to share with you the experience of the Oklahoma Highway Patrol.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Del Toro for his 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Burkeen, Ranking Member Thaindar, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today and for your leadership in examining this important public safety issue. I'm honored to serve as Sheriff of St. Lucie County, Florida, and I come before you today with more than 25 years of law enforcement experience dedicated to protecting the communities I serve. I'm here today because of a tragedy. On August 12th, 2025, 3 innocent people in my county lost their lives in a catastrophic crash on the Florida Turnpike involving a commercial motor vehicle. The investigation revealed that the driver of that vehicle had previously entered the United States illegally and was operating with a commercial driver's license issued by another state earlier that same year. For the families of those victims, this is not a policy debate, it's a permanent loss. Commercial motor vehicles can weigh up to 80,000 pounds. When operated unsafely, they have the potential to cause devastating consequences in a matter of seconds. That is why strong, consistent, and reliable safety standards for commercial driver's licensing are essential to protecting the public. Florida has taken important steps to strengthen verification, improve coordination with federal authorities, and ensure compliance with federal standards. However, when these standards vary between states, those inconsistencies can create vulnerabilities that place our communities at risk. My purpose in appearing before you today is not to assign blame, but to share the reality that I've witnessed as sheriff and to support efforts that enhance public safety, strengthen accountability, and prevent future tragedies. Highway safety is not a partisan issue. It is a public safety responsibility. The American people expect and deserve confidence that every individual operating a commercial motor vehicle on our roadways has met the highest standards of qualification, training, and verification. As sheriff, my oath is to protect life, and I'm here today to help ensure we do everything possible to uphold that responsibility. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering your questions, sir.
Thanks, Sheriff. Ms. Liu, for your opening statement.
Good afternoon, Chairman Burkeen, Ranking Member Tanadar, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am Wendy Liu, an attorney with Public Citizen Litigation Group, the litigating arm of the nonprofit consumer advocacy organization Public Citizen, which was founded in 1971. The litigation group represents the petitioners challenging the rule recently issued by the Trump administration that would prohibit documented immigrants from holding commercial driver's licenses, even though they have legal authorization from the federal government to work jobs in the United States. As we all agree, highway safety is of critical importance. Trucking crashes on the nation's roads cause serious injury and take many lives, each one a tragedy for family and friends. For that reason, Public Citizen has for decades advocated for strong rules addressing the hours of service that truckers may drive each day or week and for meaningful truck driver training. Limitations on driving hours and requirements for training are proven measures to improve highway safety. But barring people with lawful work authorization who have obtained their commercial driver's licenses by completing the required training and passing the required tests, including tests administered in English, will not make our roads safer. Doing so will replace more experienced drivers with less experienced ones and potentially increase the number of fatigued drivers on the road. It will exacerbate a well-documented need for truck drivers in the industry. It will harm the economy by increasing costs during an affordability crisis. And it will harm state and local governments and the people they serve who depend on these drivers for essential public services, including public transportation, school buses, highway and road maintenance, utility services, and disaster response. Importantly, under current law, no undocumented person, no illegal alien can hold a commercial driver's license. Every DACA recipient, asylee, asylum seeker, person with temporary protected status, or refugee who holds a non-domiciled commercial driver's license has been issued a work permit by the Department of Homeland Security's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, authorizing that person to work in the United States. And every person issued a commercial driver's license in this country, non-citizens and citizens alike, must go through the exact same training and pass the exact same tests. And every truck driver with a commercial driver's license must demonstrate English proficiency. They must be able to read and speak English sufficiently to converse with the public, understand highway traffic signs and signals, and respond to official inquiries. These requirements likely explain why the Trump administration has no data showing that non-citizens cause more crashes than U.S. citizens. And although the Department of Transportation has identified 17 examples of crashes in 2025 that it says likely involved a non-citizen, there are on average 4,000 fatal crashes every year. 17 is less than 1% of that number, meaning that over 99% of fatal crashes are caused by U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents, according to the Department of Transportation's own data. Every fatal crash is a tragedy. But prohibiting documented immigrants from driving trucks and buses will not improve highway safety. It will harm our economy. It will disrupt and curtail essential public services provided by state and local governments. And it will destroy the livelihoods of thousands of individual drivers and their families who depend on these licenses to pay for groceries, utilities, and other basic expenses. My organization has been inundated with emails and messages from people across the country who are terrified because losing their license would mean losing their sole or primary source of income and their ability to continue providing for themselves and their family. These are people who have lived in the United States for years or decades and who have built careers based on their ability to have a commercial driver's license. They include DACA recipients who have been living in the United States ever since they were small children, who have no memory of any other country, who have driven trucks safely for years, and who have met every single requirement that has been asked of them. They are workers, small business owners, dedicated family members, and contributors to the US economy. All they ask for, as one DACA recipient put it, is the opportunity to continue working, to continue providing, and to continue living productively in the only country that they have ever known as home. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Ms. Liu. I'm now going to, instead of going through ranking order, I want to recognize Representative Fong, given a time limitation on his part. Representative Fong, you are now given 5 minutes. I think you may have a special guest also as a part of your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a very important hearing that we're having, and it's very personal to me. I have the honor of introducing, I know they have to catch a flight later this afternoon, but we have, I think the chair read the story of Delilah Coleman, who was in a horrific car accident with someone who was here illegally, who obtained an illegal CDL in California. But Delilah here is now 7 years old. She's in the audience here with her father, Marcus, and her mother, Eliana, who I think they just got engaged at the White House last week, if you saw the video. So they are from Bakersfield, California, my hometown. And so I just wanted to make sure to recognize them and put a face to this issue and the family to this issue as well.
If the gentleman just yield quickly, thank you all for taking the time to be here. We are so grateful to see her in such good health. Please continue.
So I want to applaud the Coleman family. They've taken a preventable tragedy and a horrific situation that has affected them and made it their cause to make our roadways safer. And it's worth noting again, and I'll reread the details that the chair mentioned in his opening statement. In June 2024, in San Bernardino County, California, 5-year-old Delilah Coleman and her stepfather, Michael, were seriously injured in a multi-vehicle pileup caused by an illegal immigrant driving a commercial 18-wheeler who sped through a construction zone and failed to stop for traffic. Delilah suffered lifelong injuries, including cerebral palsy, developmental delays, and loss of speech, and she has now worked very hard to relearn how to walk. The driver, who illegally entered the United States in October of 2022, was released under the Biden administration and held a California-issued CDL. This preventable tragedy forever altered Delilah's bright future. I had the chance to meet with Delilah and her family to discuss Delilah's law, the legislation that they are working to introduce and to pass that would require states to limit trucking licenses to U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents and certain work visa holders. And number 2, revoke all trucking licenses currently issued to illegal migrants as a condition of receiving funding from the Department of Transportation. I did want to ask Mr. Tipton, what is your assessment on the role states have in preventing future tragedies by non-domiciled CDL drivers?
So I think it's a multifaceted role that the states can play. One is working with ICE in these 287G task force models, which allow for state and local law enforcement to be able to verify immigration status. The problem that we run into on the roadside is that the person that we're talking to may have a facially valid CDL in date, and when you run that CDL through our law enforcement network system, it comes back as valid. But then when we check on the immigration status, they're not here legally. Now, they may have originally crossed the border. I'll tell you my experience. I've interviewed many of these folks as we've taken them into custody. Under the former administration, they would cross the border, be detained, be released, and given, an employment authorization document at that time. So now that they've got this document in hand, they can then go to a truck driving training school, one of these CDL mills, get a certification, in many instances, obviously not be able to pass the certification because they can't speak English efficiently to be able to pass, and then go get a CDL. So on its face value, it looks like they're valid. But unless you have the authority and the ability to work with ICE and verify their immigration status, you don't realize that they're here illegally. So I think that's step one. States have to work with the federal government in order to be able to take adequate enforcement.
So that leads to my next question, and it refers to sanctuary state policies. In California, unfortunately, we are a sanctuary state. I opposed it when it was moving to the state legislature. But I think what you've outlined is when a CDL is issued in one state, that driver is allowed to operate across all 50 states. So if California applies a weaker CDL standard, that creates a public safety risk for the other states. Is that correct?
Absolutely, across the board. And of course, I live in a state that we call it the crossroads of America, I-35 that runs from Mexico to Canada, I-40 east and west coast, and then I-44, and those all interchange in Oklahoma City. And so the amount of nationwide over-the-road trucking that comes through our state is a massive number. So we see it routinely that other states that don't apply the same type of standard, those drivers are going to be coming right through Oklahoma.
Thank you. I appreciate the chair's flexibility. Thank you. And thank you, Delilah and the Coleman family for being here. You're all an inspiration to us. Thank you.
Great. The gentleman yields. I now recognize Representative Thanedar for his 5 minutes question.
Thank you, Chairman. Truckers move nearly 3/4 of the country's freight, making them an indispensable part of U.S. supply chain. Without truckers, there would be no food on grocery store shelves, products at big box stores, or fuel at gas stations. Nearly 20% of truck drivers in the U.S. are immigrants, just as they make up 20% of overall U.S. workforce. And they often do the demanding and dirty jobs no one else will. These drivers have invested significant time and resources into their careers as commercial drivers, and many of them have accumulated decades of experience. But now, the Trump administration is unlawfully attempting to strip some of these immigrants of their commercial licenses and their livelihood. This will not only create undue hardship on their families, but it will also further harm the U.S. economy. President Trump's economy is not the greatest ever in history, as he claims. Much like his tariffs, the president's immigration dragnet is fueling affordability crisis. Ms. Liu, can you please explain how the Department of Transportation's actions to restrict immigrants' eligibility for commercial driver's licenses will harm the U.S. economy?
Thank you for your question. Prohibiting documented immigrants from having commercial driver's licenses will increase costs in the middle of an affordability crisis. Trucks are the main way goods are moved across this country. Approximately 73% of freight by weight is moved along America's highways, from consumer products to food to construction materials. There is a well-documented need for truck drivers in this country. Industry has reportedly estimated a shortage of tens of thousands of truck drivers. The Trump administration's exclusion of documented immigrants from the truck driver workforce would force 200,000 experienced drivers out of the market, shrinking the existing workforce by 5%. That will disrupt supply chains, delay the delivery of goods and materials, and increase rates for freight operations, Already, news reports say that the cost of a single freight trip from New Jersey to Texas has gone up by more than 35% because of a national shortage of immigrant truck drivers.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, I seek unanimous consent to add to the record a letter from Teamsters California opposing DOT's rule prohibiting most non-citizens from obtaining or renewing their CDLs.
Without objection, so ordered.
In addition to the vital role truckers play in the U.S. supply chain and economy, they also play a crucial role in providing public services to our communities. They drive the school buses that take our kids to school, operate plows to clear snow during blizzards, and run the mass transit system commuters rely on to get to work, just to name a few. Ms. Liu, 19 attorney generals oppose Trump administration's efforts to take commercial driver's license away from immigrants because of the negative impact on public services in their states. Several local governments and government leaders who support the ongoing litigation shared similar concerns. Can you please walk us through how the Department of Transportation's rule would reduce and degrade essential public services?
Thank you for your question. Prohibiting documented immigrants from having CDLs will disrupt and curtail essential public services. These governments depend on drivers to drive buses for schools, mass transit systems to transport people to work, to operate construction vehicles, to maintain and repair roads. With fewer drivers, these services will be disrupted and public safety will be harmed. For example, a shortage of snowplow operators means that a local government will not be able to treat the roads, resulting in more hazardous driving conditions and increasing crashes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Liu. I'm out of time, so I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. He yields. I now recognize Representative Van Epps for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this immensely important hearing and to our witnesses for joining us. Highway safety impacts Americans every day. States like California that refuse to enforce driver's license standards are putting every driver and passenger on the road in danger. When even one unqualified driver is handed a commercial driver's license, the danger does not stop at a state line. It puts every highway and every family on the road at risk. And the reality is, this is not about a single reckless driver. It is about tens of thousands operating nationwide. Last year in my home state of Tennessee, the Biden administration granted a non-English speaking illegal alien work authorization, allowing him to obtain a commercial driver's license. This man went on to cause a multi-vehicle crash, killing one and injuring 2 others. These senseless deaths must stop. I'm extremely proud of what the Tennessee Highway Patrol has accomplished working with DHS to get dangerous illegal aliens off our roads and keep our communities safe. But this issue has to be fixed across the board. And whether it be fraud or sheer negligence, we cannot tolerate sanctuary cities giving licenses to unsafe drivers. Sheriff Del Toro, we have heard about the tragic vehicle incident in St. Lucie County, Florida, involving an illegal alien from India carrying a non-domiciled CDL, killing 3 people. While we recognize this remains an active and ongoing investigation, can you share any further details with us and how this incident has impacted your county?
So it's impacted our county in a very tragic way by the loss of 3 lives. And it was an illegal U-turn in the middle of our Florida Turnpike. And really for no reason. There was no emergency that was ahead. It was just an illegal U-turn where completely unsafe maneuver caused 3 people who were traveling close to 80 miles an hour to go underneath the back of that truck and lose their lives. So it's impacted our community in a big way. It was a national story, obviously, because of the fact of the non-domicile CDL issue by an illegal immigrant that came over the border, I believe in 2018, was issued a notice to appear for that violation. And then, as the chairman stated, had failed a test in the state of Washington, I believe 10 times before obtaining it in California. So it shed a big light on things, and I think one of the things that we have to do as public servants and elected officials is identify problems and come up with ways to solve those problems. I believe the chairman mentioned there was 200,000 CDLs issued to illegal immigrants. And we all agree that illegal immigrants by the law are not allowed to obtain these non-domiciled CDLs. So what can we do to solve that problem? And I think Florida has taken a big step towards that. And I'd like to just share with you a few key components to some changes that they've made regarding non-domiciled CDLs.
Please.
So Florida only issues licenses to drivers who are in the country legally. Licenses issued to non-citizens with temporary legal presence, non-domiciled, are valid for a year or the last date of the customer's legal status, whichever comes soonest. For each license issued to non-citizens, Florida verifies electronically, which the DHS and the SAVE system, that the customer had legal presence in the United States. We then scan and maintain all documents presented by the driver to establish their identity and legal status, and these documents are available in our DAVID system. All issuance involving drivers with temporary legal presence, non-domiciled, are conducted in person. If a non-citizen is only allowed to be in the U.S. on a temporary basis, we place the words temporary on the front of that driver's license, and that is due to federal Motor Vehicle Carrier Safety Administration rules updates. And Florida will also begin printing the words non-domiciled on the license moving forward. The written CDL knowledge test was previously provided in Spanish and English with prior approval from the FMCSA. However, Florida recently changed its policy that all driver's license testing includes Class E, correct, must be taken in English only. The behind-the-wheel CDL skills test is also provided in English as required by FMCSA regulations. And at the request of FMCSA, Florida paused all issuance of CDLs to non-domiciled drivers on November 24, 2025, and plans to resume issuances after the new FMCSA rules become effective in mid-March this month. So this isn't to hurt anybody that's here legally in our country. It's just a way to vet it out, increase our standards, which I think is our responsibility as elected officials to protect the public and enhance roadway safety.
Thanks, Sheriff, and thanks for being here today. Mr. Chairman, I'm out of time. Yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Representative Strong for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Rakeen. I thank each of our witnesses for being here today, for the work that you do to keep America safe. This hearing is about a simple issue. When Americans share the road with a commercial vehicle, they should be confident that people behind the wheel are properly vetted, lawfully authorized, and qualified to operate a commercial vehicle. I speak firsthand. I held a commercial driver's license with a passenger endorsement because my family owned a fleet of 45-foot Prevost buses that traveled throughout this country for more than 40 years without a chargeable accident. Last year, you think the last thing you would want is someone behind the wheel of a commercial vehicle that doesn't understand the laws of the land, don't understand turning radiuses, don't understand stopping distances, and they've got to respect the laws of the land. That's a simulation to the United States of America. Under the previous administration, enforcement gaps allowed fraudulent documents and stolen identities to slip through the cracks, leaving states to deal with drivers who never should have been behind the wheel of a commercial vehicle. In my home state of Alabama, joint enforcement actions recently removed dozens of unsafe truck drivers from the highways, including individuals with no valid license at all. Unfortunately, not all states share the same sense of urgency in taking action. Commissioner Tipton, in your testimony, you confirmed that states are encountering fake documents, identity fraud, and completely invalid license being used to obtain or attempt to obtain CDLs. Alabama's experience shows that targeted coordination between state law enforcement and federal partners is crucial to identifying and removing unsafe commercial drivers from the roads. And you've described a similar effort in Oklahoma. How essential is that kind of strong routine coordination between state law enforcement and federal partners to effective CDL oversight and highway safety?
Thank you for the question. Again, it goes to every area of state coordination with the federal government. At the issuance, at the certification of schools who put on this training, and the ability to ensure that the training is of quality and that the people who pass that training do understand the rules of the road and can read road signs and all the things that you just explained. On the enforcement side of it, we would not be able to do this work if it wouldn't be for the partnership that we have with the federal government. I'll tell you what we're seeing now. We've ran, I believe, 5 special emphasis at our ports of entry over the past 9 months. So we did one out west that I spoke of earlier. We then went to the eastern side of the state on I-40 at the Oklahoma-Arkansas border. Within minutes of us setting up and starting our operation, my intel analysts were seeing social media posts all the way out to the North and South Carolina coast telling people, Oklahoma's doing it again, go around Oklahoma, don't go through Oklahoma if you're driving a truck and you're not here legally, because they knew that we were working with ICE. So now we're combating it to where they're gonna either divert around our state or they're gonna hold in another state until we're not out working. So I believe it's incumbent upon us to work in a coordinated effort across multiple states at the same time, same type of operations, if you really want to get a true enforcement and make some true action on
It's
this.
the greatest compliment your state can get is that they're enforcing the laws. When you're, Sheriff Del Toro, when your deputies stop a commercial vehicle and discover licensing or identity issues that doesn't just raise paperwork concerns, it creates a real safety risk on the roads. Is that a true statement?
Yes, sir.
One theme we've heard today is that verification matters, whether it's verifying identity, legal eligibility, or basic qualifications before someone is trusted with a serious responsibility. The House has twice passed the Save America Act, which focuses on requiring voter ID to ensure only U.S. citizens participate in federal elections. I was proud to vote in favor of that legislation. Sheriff Del Toro, from a public safety standpoint, do you agree that the same common sense principles apply here, that verifying identity and eligibility before granting access, whether to a ballot or an 80,000-pound commercial vehicle, is far safer than trying to fix the problem after the fact?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize myself for my 5 minutes of questioning. I want to say how excited I am that the Trump administration has taken this issue very seriously. And on February 13th of 2026, how the Department of Transportation did issue a final rule that will restrict the issuance of non-domiciled CDLs to foreign drivers. And they will raise the eligibility standards to prevent these unqualified drivers and these bad actors. We're not talking about those that are here legally. We're talking about those that are in violation of FMCSA federal guidelines. The CDL issuance is not to be taken lightly. Again, you can weaponize, especially with the hazmat endorsement, you can weaponize an 80,000-pound rig. For those in the trucking industry, for those of us that had to learn to drive a semi and downshift, and now that the innovation of automatic transmissions are out there, it's making the type of driver that is sitting in a semi not as educated on downshifting and how far you have to pace off of someone in front of you. And if you're a truck driver, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so there's a heightened safety element that has to be adhered to. And the fact that we're hearing about these CDL meals that may be lacking not only basic instruction to make sure people can read in English the road signs and know that there is a sign that says your speed in a work zone, and they would otherwise, if they didn't understand the ability to read that, would only see a number flashing at them. There's some real critical elements that being able to read in English is going to create havoc if we don't understand this, and it's much far and surpass me of that. What can we be doing to any of the witnesses? I'm going to zero in with you, Mr. Tipton, because you've been paying attention to other states like Oklahoma. What can we be doing on a federal level outside of what the president, his administration has been doing? I know that Representative Rouser has a measure that could be codified. What else can we be doing on the federal level?
Again, as I mentioned earlier, I think that already suits have been filed against the new upcoming rules that FMCA is going to implement this month. I think it's such a critical area that an employee authorization document is not sufficient to be able to then turn around and go get a CDL. It does not, and it's obvious that the crackdown on the CDL mills, the schools that are supposedly safely training these folks, when our troopers encounter someone who has supposedly passed a test, has their CDL, and obviously can't read and speak English and understand the rules of the road, those schools have to be shut down.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, and this is in my experience with what I've seen in interviewing these people who are driving these trucks as we take them into custody. I believe there's been coordinated effort to bring people to the southern border under the last administration, get them through the border, get them an EAD issued.
Yeah.
They go to the school and get this certificate and then go to a state.
870,000 new CDLs issued under Biden's first year. The fact that we know 50% of those who have obtained a CDL in the state of New York are fraudulently, they are illegally here. They are not in compliance. 50% of what New York has issued. 17,000 people with CDLs have been granted them in violation of federal statute in the state of California. What else can we be doing on the state levels? What I'm excited about is the opportunity for governors, state lawmakers to have heard this hearing, understand what the Trump administration is doing. These thousands of commercial truck drivers, as you said, they're getting on social media and saying, bypass Oklahoma, bypass Indiana. They're taking this thing seriously because they're working with ICE. What would be your message? Because you're going to have the sanctuary type states that are going to, and I'm grateful to an administration that's saying, you're going to do this in violation, get ready. Federal highway funds could be your loss. That is the right thing to do. The federal law has to be followed because national security is at risk here as well. What would be your comments to any state governor in a red state that would be willing to bring ICE in, let them work with their OHP, their highway patrolmen like you all did, and making sure that they were an education, but making sure the database of who's here illegally, that if 20 states were doing this, what could that do to expedite getting these people caught and off the road?
It can be done in such a short amount of time because they're moving every day across the country. I think Oklahoma is a model example of when state and local law enforcement work with ICE. There's not chaos. There's not all of this uproar. Oklahoma, across the year 25, we ranked in the top 3 month to month on how many illegal criminal aliens we removed from our state, from the country. We ranked in the top 3. You don't see all the chaos, and it's due to that cooperation. So for the safety of everybody involved, both the motoring public on the CMV issue, the potential terrorist type threat, you and I come from a state, we understand what truck bombs can do. And for the safety of everybody involved, the cooperation with ICE is critical and can be done in a calm, legitimate, legal way.
With that, my time has expired. I want to, just because I think we've come in under time. Is there anyone else? Representative Thanadar, Representative Van Epps, would you have an additional question that you would like to ask, given our panelists still here, and either one of you?
I'll ask one more, Mr.
Go ahead,
Chairman, if that's okay. Just to follow up on that last point, to Commissioner Tipton and Sheriff, commercial drivers have access to ports, energy facilities, military bases, and hazardous materials routes. How does your state conduct enhanced vetting for sensitive cargo?
I can't speak to how they vet out cargo at ports. I've never worked down near one. But I can tell you, though, as far as the vetting of drivers that needs to happen, and that's why it's so important that Florida's taken the step to vet these drivers that are getting these non-domicile CDLs are done in person. They verify with our federal partners. We're no longer working in silos. And I'm sure they're doing that as well with cargo as well. So I think it's just an important thing to recognize the changes we've made in Florida And moving forward, I think we need to see more of that, especially with, can I just touch real quick on the Real ID in the 2005 Act, where the states still have the right to issue licensing, but in order to meet federal standards, they have to meet certain standards to be recognized federally to get on a commercial aircraft transporting hazardous materials. That's why I think it's so important. Just that simple act itself could really help in raising the standards up for these states where they can still do the license issuing, but they have to meet some federal standards, which could include in-person vetting, their immigration status, working with the states, working with our federal partners to ensure that, to ensure safer roadways.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Following the theme of allowing an additional question, Representative Thanador, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Is it true that the standards for commercial driver's licenses for U.S. citizens and permanent residents are identical to the standards for non-domiciled commercial driver's licenses? That is, documented immigrants who are authorized to work in the United States.
Can you repeat the question, sir?
It's just a yes or no question.
I know.
Are the standards the same as they are for the U.S. citizens, drivers, or permanent
Yes.
resident?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And is it also true that the requirements to obtain commercial driver's license are extensive in that applicants must demonstrate English language proficiency, demonstrate 30 different vehicle inspections, control, and driving skills, and demonstrate their knowledge in 20 general areas, and consent to alcohol testing? Again,
I
yes.
can only speak for the state of Florida, but that's correct in the state of Florida.
All right. Given the standards and requirements are the same across the board, can you please explain to me how the Department of Transportation's rules restricting commercial driver's licenses to people with H-2A, H-2B, and E-2 visas, and stripping it from refugees, asylees, and DACA recipients improves highway safety?
Because there's obviously gaps in these standards because people that are here illegally have obtained these licenses as well. So I'm not trying to shed any negative light on anybody here that's here legally obtaining these, or differences between whether you're a citizen, permanent resident. Those standards, I think, are the same in the state of Florida. But the one thing we're not seeing in the state of Florida is licenses being issued to illegal immigrants because of our vetting process. And I think that's where we can close the gap federally from state to state to improve highway safety.
Ms. Liu, what's your answer to that?
Thank you for the question. That's right. The standards are identical for U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, documented immigrants alike. Regardless of citizenship or immigration status, all drivers must demonstrate English language proficiency, demonstrate 30 different vehicle inspection, control, and driving skills, demonstrate their knowledge in 20 different areas. It would not improve highway safety to prohibit documented immigrants from holding these licenses. In fact, forcing 200,000 drivers out of the market and depleting the workforce by 5% will make our roads less safe by replacing experienced drivers with less experienced ones and increasing driver fatigue for the drivers remaining on the road. Moreover, there is no data, the Trump administration has no data showing that non-citizens cause more crashes than U.S. citizens. They have conceded that there is no empirical relationship between a person's nation of domicile and safety outcomes. And according to the Trump administration's own data, there are approximately 4,000 crashes on average in a year, of which 17 were caused by a documented immigrant. That means more than 99% of crashes are caused by U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents. If the concern is that states are improperly issuing licenses to people who do not, in fact, already meet the existing requirements about training, English, testing, then the solution is to tighten the administrative steps to make sure that licenses are going to people who, in fact, do satisfy all of the requirements. But excluding documented immigrants from being truck drivers altogether would harm highway safety, destroy the livelihoods of thousands, increase costs during an affordability crisis, and disrupt essential public services.
Thank you so much. So it looks like we can look at the statistical data. We can look at total number of commercial drivers. we can see what percent of them are the immigrants that this law is trying to change. And if you look at all of the fatal accidents that happen, what percent of those are committed by the immigrants? And it from what you're telling me, it seems like most of 99% of the collisions, accidents are as a result of by U.S. citizen drivers or permanent resident drivers. Is that true?
Thank you for the question. The Trump administration has identified 17 examples, as I said, of documented immigrants who've caused fatal crashes, but there are over 4,000 in a year. So that's less than 1%, meaning the vast majority is caused by U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. He yields. So I just want to follow up, and this is more than anecdotal. Again, going to the theme of allowing additional time for questions is a tragic example. Sheriff Del Toro is the individual who made the U-turn. He was here illegally. He failed his commercial driver's license 10 times in a matter of 2 months, then yet goes to the state of California, obtains his commercial driver's license, and immediately, within a very short-term time frame, leads to the tragic end that you know of in your county.
Correct.
So if someone's not willing to concede that the lack of speaking English, the lack of skill is evident, and really zeroing in on California and Pennsylvania and New York, who's failing 50% of their CDL non-domiciled we know are here illegally. Our attention needs to really be focused there. And again, the carrot and stick, federal highway transportation funding, I am so grateful to an administration who means what they say and is willing to follow suit when there's a lack of adherence. Mr. Tipton, in Oklahoma, I find it interesting that when you all began to lead on this issue, we're not just talking about limited to the border with Mexico, shared by the United States. These are the individuals you all found that were operating with these commercial truck drivers. India, Uzbekistan, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, China, Pakistan, Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Turkey, Cuba, Guatemala, Venezuela. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir. It was from around the globe.
And it's not just the national security element. It's also, if you're willing to skirt the law, it tells you something about your character. If you're willing to have compromise in one area, you'll compromise in another area. And so I'm grateful. I see in the audience another person from Oklahoma made me heightenedly aware, Cole Stevens, thank you to making me heightenedly aware of what we're also seeing potentially of insurance that's being moved around. It's not just CDL mills that they're gaming how you can actually obtain a CDL. It's also the potential of when you go to a weigh station, which I've had to do, to present your insurance verification. Did you all see in the time period that you were there of insurance being moved around on one vehicle or another?
Absolutely.
Can you explain that? Can you expound upon that?
It's I don't know how else to explain it other than it looks like a well-organized method of circumventing, whether it be insurance, how they got the job, how they were brought into the country.
Okay.
So it's a well-organized. And let me also say this. I'll use this as an example. While one of my troopers is out with a truck doing an inspection at a weigh station on one of our emphases, at the same time, another trooper has a passenger van stopped with, I believe, 8 people inside of it, none of whom could speak English. None of them had any type of identification on them. The driver in the semi that was stopped behind them had all of the passports of the folks that were in the van. We've found people who have active investigations and warrants for human smuggling, drug trafficking, money laundering, assault, driving under the influence, and failure to appear in court. So this is a even larger public safety issue when we let unvetted, untrained, unskilled people operate these vehicles.
I would just say this, and I'm going to land the plane. This is not just public safety. It's not just national security. It's also, for those in the trucking industry who understand how expensive insurance is, it's also those that would game the system, that would undermine legal process of being legally operational and find foreign actors to work with them, whether it's to modify their logs, their time logs, to make insurance, to obtain insurance fraudulently, moving insurance from one vehicle to another, therefore undercutting someone, a U.S. citizen, someone who has been established for years, trying to operate legally. Now they're having to compete with that full measure of someone operating underhanded and under the table. There's a full can of worms here that is yet to be fully explored. And I'm grateful to you witnesses for helping us get a greater look. I'm grateful to President Trump mentioning this during his State of the Union address. This is something that has to be uncovered to a greater level. I want to thank your witnesses for your testimony, members for their questions. Members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witnesses. We would ask the witnesses to respond to these in writing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7E, the hearing record will be open for 10 days. Without objection, this committee stands adjourned.